True prosperity isn't about reaching the top and just building a fortress to protect your status.
Right.
It's actually the complete opposite. It's about the highest power stepping down, the lowest energy rising up, and, really embracing the messy, beautiful flow of life.
It completely flips the script on how we usually think about success.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to our deep dive into the mind key to the I Ching. We are unlocking a thousands of years old framework today. And it's all about this really fascinating concept of flow.
Yeah, and we are so deeply conditioned to think of success as this one-way elevator ride to the penthouse.
Right, totally. Just get to the top.
Get to the top, and then your only job is lock the doors once you get there so nobody else can get in.
Right, hoarding the success.
Exactly. But this ancient framework completely dismantles that idea. We are exploring a specific state described in the philosophy known as Tai.
A tie.
Yeah, which roughly translates to prosperity or flow. And to really grasp what this means, you have to visualize how this state is actually built.
Okay, paint the picture for us.
So the I Ching uses these things called hexagrams. They are simply stacks of 6 horizontal lines. Some are solid, some are broken. And they basically map out different archetypal situations in life.
Like different stages or scenarios you might find yourself in?
Exactly. Now, in the hexagram for prosperity, the element of earth is placed on the top, and the element of heaven is placed on the bottom.
Which, that feels completely upside down if you think about the natural physics of those two things.
Right, because earth is naturally heavy.
Yeah, Earth is heavy, it's dense, it naturally wants to settle downward. And heaven is light-driven and naturally wants to rise upward. So by putting the heavy element on top,
And the light element on the bottom.
you are basically forcing them to cross paths. I was trying to picture this dynamically when I was looking over the concepts, and it hit me. It's the exact mechanical process of brewing French press coffee.
Oh, wow. That's actually a perfect physical translation of the concept.
Right, because think about the mechanics of a French press. If the heavy hot water just stays quietly at the bottom of the glass carafe, and the light, dry coffee grounds just float peacefully on top, you don't get coffee.
No, you definitely don't.
You just have a glass of hot water with some, yard waste sitting on
Just
it.
floating there.
Right, nothing happens. But when you force the heavy hot water down from the top and the light grounds swirl up from the bottom, they collide.
They intermingle.
Exactly. That active, forceful collision is literally the only thing that extracts the flavor. And this framework is arguing that prosperity is that exact collision.
Yeah, it is not a static trophy sitting on a shelf.
Right.
It is a state of active, unhindered circulation. And if either side stops reaching, the flow stops.
The coffee doesn't brew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the immediate question becomes, how does a person actually initiate this movement? Let's start with that upward drive from the bottom.
Okay, so this is the heaven energy, right? The
Right.
light stuff moving up.
Yes. If you are at the bottom of the ladder, say you're launching a startup or beginning a new career path or trying to get a grassroots movement off the ground, you are full of that light rising ambition.
You've got all the drive.
Right. And the philosophy visualizes the beginning of this upward journey with a very specific earthy action. It calls it pulling up roots.
Pulling up roots.
Yeah. The idea is that when you pull off one blade of grass, the whole interwoven root system comes out of the soil with it.
Oh, I love that, because genuine ambition naturally taps into a shared underlying current.
Exactly.
You see this dynamic constantly in the tech world, particularly when someone starts an open source software project.
Oh, that's a great example.
Or even just a couple of founders in a garage. You rarely pull yourself up entirely alone. Your initial passion acts like that first blade of grass.
And it brings everything else with it.
Right. If the vision is authentic, pulling on it naturally attracts a root system of co-founders, early adopters, and, like-minded allies who want to build with you.
You don't need authoritarian control.
No, you don't need a massive corporate budget either, because the collective momentum does all the heavy lifting for you.
The underlying mechanism there is shared belief. But, this is really important, there is a well-documented shadow side to this initial clustering.
The danger of the exclusive clique.
Precisely. Finding your root system makes it incredibly tempting to huddle up with people who share your exact worldview, your exact background, your exact biases.
Because it's comfortable.
Yeah, you form this tight little bubble because it feels safe and completely frictionless.
And then, the startup dies a year later because they built a product that only their 5 friends actually wanted to use.
Right.
They became a total echo chamber.
And that is exactly why the upward momentum stalls out. If your root system isolates itself from diverse perspectives, stops absorbing new nutrients from the surrounding soil.
The cognitive diversity just dries up entirely.
Exactly. But assuming you avoid that trap and you keep your roots expansive, that rising energy inevitably slams into the friction of reality.
Because growth is never pristine.
Never. And the framework describes this necessary next phase as having the capacity to, quote, bear the uncultivated.
Bear the uncultivated.
Right, which essentially means having the stomach to digest chaos and do the dirty work. Some translations call it crossing the river on foot.
So if I translate that to like a modern corporate setting, is that the middle manager who inherits a completely toxic department?
Yes.
Or like a messy legacy code base that no one wants to touch. And instead of avoiding the disaster, they just quietly start rewriting the architecture and fixing the plumbing.
That is exactly it.
But wait, I have a hesitation here. It's kind of the nice guy fallacy.
How so?
Well, if I am the one constantly absorbing everyone else's mess and, digesting the chaos of a broken system, doesn't that just make me a spineless pushover who does everyone's homework?
That is such a common fear, but there's a profound psychological distinction here between lacking boundaries and possessing inner strength.
Okay, break that down for me.
Being a pushover means adopting the toxic habits of the group just to fit in, or doing the work resentfully while playing the victim.
Right, the martyr complex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But bearing the uncultivated is about building quiet, undeniable leverage.
Leverage.
Yeah. When you roll up your sleeves and take on the unglamorous task of fixing the organizational plumbing, and you do it without constantly complaining that the water is muddy, you become structurally indispensable.
Oh, wow.
You aren't a doormat. You are the filter keeping the ecosystem alive.
So you stop whining about the broken system and you just quietly become the person the system cannot function without.
Precisely.
That flips the power dynamic entirely. You don't need the environment to be perfect because you have the internal capacity to handle the rough edges.
And doing that messy work actually accelerates your upward trajectory to its absolute peak. You've built your coalition, you've digested the chaos, and now things are operating flawlessly.
You're crushing it.
You are at the summit of your upward drive. Which brings us to a really fascinating threshold in the framework. The wisdom required at this peak is the clear-headedness to accept a brutal law of physics.
Which is?
There's no plane without a slope.
No plane without a slope. Man, there is a massive friction point here with how modern business operates today.
Absolutely.
Because we are so obsessed with the idea of infinite linear projection. We want the revenue graph to go up and to the right forever.
Without any dips.
Right. But acknowledging that there is no plane without a slope means accepting that no flat, easy road goes on indefinitely without eventually tipping downward.
It's impossible.
When you are standing at the absolute top of a mountain, the only physical way forward is down.
Denying gravity doesn't make you a visionary. It makes you vulnerable.
Yeah.
Consider the psychology of a brilliant investor during a roaring bull market. The amateur investors are taking out heavy loans to buy more. They're throwing caution to the wind because they're operating under the delusion that the flat road goes on forever.
Right. The line always goes up.
Exactly. But the seasoned investor, they are quietly hoarding cash.
Yeah.
Or think of an agricultural cycle. A farmer experiencing a record harvest doesn't throw a massive party and consume all the crops.
Right. They store the grain for the winter.
Because they know the winter's coming.
It's not pessimism. It's an operational respect for the cyclical nature of reality.
Yes, beautifully said.
But, when everyone around you is clapping and telling you you're a genius, it takes immense emotional discipline to start preparing your emergency funds.
It really does.
You have to actively resist the arrogance of your own success.
And that arrogance is exactly what causes the energy to stagnate at the top.
Because you stop moving.
Right. The ambitious energy is pushed all the way up, but if it just hits at the ceiling and stays there, the flow is broken.
The hot water is just sitting at the top of the French press.
Exactly. To maintain true prosperity, the established power, the earth energy, must actively yield and move downward.
It has to descend.
It does. And this introduces probably the most difficult psychological maneuver for anyone in a position of leadership, which is the ego drop.
The ego
The
drop.
framework describes this as fluttering down.
Fluttering down, like a bird dropping from a branch.
Exactly.
It implies a descent that is light, deliberate, and entirely unforced.
It's not a crash.
Right. In a real-world scenario, I picture a Fortune 500 CEO. The traditional ego-driven image is the executive isolated in the mahogany boardroom, passing down decrees from on high.
We all know that CDO.
Right. So fluttering down would be that CEO skipping the catered boardroom lunch to go sit in the warehouse break room, just, eating a sandwich and genuinely listening to the logistics crew.
The operative word there is genuinely.
Yeah.
The intent behind the dissent is the entire ballgame.
Because human beings have a highly evolved radar for calculated manipulation.
We really do.
We've all seen the corporate PR stunt version of this. The CEO is in the break room, but there's a whole communications team trailing them, taking carefully framed photos for social media.
And it completely backfires.
Right, it's a transaction, it's not real.
When people detect that hypocritical showmanship, the trust is instantly shattered. It actually breeds more resentment than if the executive had simply stayed locked in the boardroom.
Because the workers feel used as props.
Exactly. Fluttering down requires an intentional unwealthing of the interaction.
Unwealthing, I like that.
You have to completely strip away your title, your leverage, and your status in that moment. You aren't the savior stepping down to grace the workers with your presence. You are simply another human being trying to understand the friction points of the day.
You are deliberately refusing to use your power to control the dynamic.
And that takes a staggering amount of internal security.
It really does. And that security is put to the ultimate test in the next phase of yielding. The ancient metaphor used here is pretty wild.
It really is.
It describes an emperor marrying off his younger sister.
Right. And to understand this, in the context of ancient power structures, keeping royal blood within the palace walls was how you consolidated control.
You keep the power in the family.
Exactly. So by marrying his sister off to a lower rank, the emperor is actively breaking down class barriers.
He's giving away a piece of his power.
Yes. And translating that into a broader principle, it dictates that the highest level of an organization must actively pass its most vital core resources down to the grassroots level to keep the ecosystem breathing.
Man, this goes against every biological instinct we have about protecting our territory.
It really is counterintuitive.
Think about a senior partner at a prestigious law firm.
Okay.
They are at the twilight of their career, and they control the biggest, most lucrative client on the firm's roster.
The crown jewel.
Right. Their instinct is to hold on to that client with a death grip, because that relationship represents their relevance and their power.
But hoarding that resource might protect their ego in the short term,
Yeah.
but it slowly suffocates the firm.
Because the young talent has no room to grow. Passing the core resource in this case is that senior partner calling a hungry, incredibly talented junior associate into their office and handing over the star client.
Which is terrifying for the senior partner.
Oh, completely terrifying. It requires them to step back and willingly diminish their own spotlight. The terror there is the fear of becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
But if you don't pass that foundational resource down to the upward driving energy, the junior associate eventually leaves out of frustration, the talent pool drains, and the firm just dies a slow death.
It forces leaders to answer a very uncomfortable question. Are you trying to build a monument to your own ego? Or are you trying to build a living ecosystem that survives you?
Wow.
True leaders find a profound sense of relief in passing the torch. They derive their satisfaction from watching the next generation thrive using the tools they provided.
That's a huge mindset shift.
It is. But even with the most perfect flow, with the top yielding and the bottom rising, ecosystems eventually cycle out.
Which brings us to a really sobering, brutal truth in this framework. The final imagery states that the city wall eventually collapses back into the moat.
The end of the cycle.
After the glorious collision, after the passing of resources, all prosperity concludes. The structures you built, no matter how magnificent or well-intentioned, eventually crumble back into the earth.
And the advice given for this exact moment is incredibly counterintuitive.
What does it say?
It simply says, do not use the army.
Do not use the army, so don't fight the structural collapse.
Exactly.
The friction here is knowing the difference between a temporary, tough quarter where you need to, rally the troops, and a fundamental end of an era.
That is the hardest thing to distinguish.
Think about Blockbuster Video. It is the ultimate modern tragedy of this.
Oh, perfect example.
They were the undisputed king of media consumption at the absolute peak of prosperity.
They had walls everywhere.
Right. But then broadband, internet, and streaming arrived. The fundamental architecture of how humans consumed entertainment shifted. The walls were collapsing into the moat.
And using the army, in their case, was spending millions of dollars trying to fight a paradigm shift.
They literally tried to build better VHS shelves.
They doubled down on late fees.
Yeah.
They fought the collapse of their city instead of recognizing that the era of physical rentals was structurally over.
A peaceful acceptance, choosing not to use the army, would have meant looking at the changing landscape and gracefully cannibalizing their own business model before the market did it for them.
Right, acknowledging this slope.
They could have taken their massive brand recognition and remaining capital to pivot entirely, or simply closed up shop with their dignity intact.
Instead, they bankrupted themselves, trying to artificially freeze time.
There is zero shame in a cycle naturally ending. The tragedy is destroying your legacy trying to fight gravity.
Recognizing when the game has fundamentally changed saves your remaining energy for the next cycle.
Yeah.
It removes the exhausting pressure of having to win the exact same game forever.
It is incredibly liberating when you internalize it. Let's bring this dynamic loop back to your own life, your career trajectory, your creative projects, your relationships.
Where are you in the process?
Exactly. Where are you currently sitting in the French press? Are you the ambitious upward energy? If so, are you ensuring your roots are diverse? And are you willing to quietly digest the chaos of a messy environment to build your leverage?
Or are you the established energy sitting comfortably at the top?
Right. Are you willing to drop your ego, flutter down without an audience, and actually hand your best resources over to the people climbing up behind you?
And as you locate yourself in that flow, consider the most fascinating hidden mechanic of this entire philosophy.
What's that?
By defining prosperity as this active, exhausting collision of opposites, it guarantees its own impermanence.
And it has to end.
Peak prosperity naturally and inevitably exhausts itself, transitioning directly into the next historical phase, which the framework refers to as pi, or stagnation.
Stagnation.
The flow stops, the elements separate. There are just two halves of the same heartbeat.
Which leaves us with a profound final thought to process. If peak prosperity naturally births its own decline, what if our modern obsession with infinite permanent growth is the exact delusion that accelerates our structural collapse?
It's a scary thought.
It really is.
Wow.
What if, instead of white-knuckling your grip on the steering wheel and living in terror of your next phase of stagnation or failure, you started preparing for it today?
Embracing the winter.
Exactly. Not treating it as a catastrophic failure of your abilities, but simply as the winter season in the long, messy, beautiful flow of your life.
It changes everything.
It really does. Keep brewing, everyone. We'll see you next time.